right, welcome back. This is the video for CSS for the timeline section. So in our last video, we built all of this HTML for the timeline. Now we are going to style that timeline to look like this using CSS. So let's get started. Okay, first things first, I'm going to jump over to my styles.css file. I'm going to write a little comment just to keep myself organized. So we'll say experience section styles. Now, if I take a look at my website, the first thing I want to do here is add some space right here. So I want to give myself a little bit more space inside of this section. This experience is like too much inside of the About Me section. So in order to add space inside of an element, we should use padding. So we'll go ahead and do that. So on the first line here underneath the experience section, we'll target the class of experience, and we will add some padding. And I am going to add 8% on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. And that should give me a lot more space on the top and bottom of that section. So let me save this, and we can go back and refresh. And yeah, that's really pushed that experience title down. And now I've got some more space at the bottom of this section too. Okay, before we continue, I'm just gonna go to the top here and I'm just gonna turn this border back on just so we can see where everything stops and starts. So to uncomment this border, you can highlight it and just hit Command or Control question mark, and that should take the comment away. So I'll save that and I'll refresh. And now we can see the border around everything. Okay, next thing, I probably want to make this HR a little bit smaller, and I want to fix some of the spacing there. So that is going to be the next thing I tackle in this section. Now, if we go back and we look at the HTML, notice that it's just HR. Okay, there's nothing that distinguishes this HR from the HR in the About Me section. So I'm going to use a parent-child selector here to get really specific. I'm going to say target the HR inside of the class of experience. And to do that, we would say .experience space HR. So I'm targeting the HR element inside of the class of experience. And I'm going to fix the margin on the top to make it a little bit smaller. So margin top, 3%. Right now it's at 5 in the About section, so we want to make that a little bit smaller. I also want to make the margin on the bottom a little bit smaller, and I think it's at about 10% on the About section, if we remember. So margin bottom, I'm going to try 6% and just see what that looks like. And then I'm going to make the width a little bit smaller as well, so I'll say width 20%. Okay. And let's just go look at, so the HR right now, the width is 50%. It's a little bit too big. There's 5% margin on the top and 15% margin on the bottom. So again, a little bit too big. We're just getting really specific with the HR inside of the experience section. It's not going to affect the rest of the HRs on the page. Just this one in particular is what we're targeting. And we're just gonna adjust it for what we need here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that and then give my website a refresh. I think that looks a little bit better. We probably need to bring this width down even more. So let's try 10% here and refresh again. And I think that looks a little bit better. So if we go and look at, maybe not 10%, maybe even 12%, because it doesn't seem to be like covering the whole word here. So let's try even like 12%, and then let's make the margin on the top even a little bit smaller, 2%. Let's try 1% actually, and just see what that looks like. So refresh, and I think that that is closer to our actual picture of the website there. Yeah, that's looking a little better. Okay, what else do we want to change here? So before we jump into our timeline, I'm just gonna do a couple little fixes here. So our H3s and our H4s, I probably want to change the size of those. They're really small right now. It's hard to tell that they're actually titles. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. So I'm going to say H3, and I am going to give it a font size of 3.5 rem, so 35 pixels. Let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, a little bit bigger. That's looking better. And then we're gonna target the H4, and I'm gonna try to give that a font size of 2.5 rem and see what that looks like. Yeah, and I think that looks better as well. And then I'm actually just gonna center both of those. So H3, H4. So I'm targeting both H3 and H4, and I'm just going to text align center. So here on line 75, I'm selecting two selectors at the same time, both H3 and H4, and that way I only need to write that text align center rule once. And notice here that it's centered, so that is why I'm centering it. So let's give that a little refresh. Okay, doesn't look perfect yet. We'll get there. Let's jump into the timeline. So if we remember from our HTML, we wrapped this div called timeline around all of those little divs inside of it, and that is the parent div. So that's what we're going to put display flex on. And we want basically the divs to go to a new line once they've taken up all of the space on the current line. There's a property that we can use to do that. So let's just go back to that Flexbox CSS tricks guide. And let's talk about how to do that. So if we scroll down here, display flex, okay. Flex direction, row is gonna be fine for us. Row is the default, so we don't really need to worry about that. The thing that we wanna worry about here is this flex wrap. So by default, all of the flex items will try to fit onto a single line. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm gonna come back to our code here, and I'm gonna target the class of timeline, and I'm going to say display flex. So I'm gonna save that, and we can refresh. And now everything is trying to be on one line. That's not exactly what we want. We want to have two things on one line. So I am going to use flex wrap, because by default it's no wrap. So now once something takes up an entire line, it will push the next element to the next line. So I'm going to save. We're going to refresh and just see the difference. Okay, so now everything's back to its own line except for these two dates, because they only need to take up, or they don't need to take up quite as much space. But now I'm going to tell the elements actually how big I want them to be. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to target date, and I'm going to target description, because those are the two divs, the two classes for the divs, the different types of divs inside of my timeline. So description, and I am going to make them a width of 50% each. So then I should have only two things per line. So let me give it a refresh here, and yeah, there we go. We've got current and the description here, 2021 and the description here, and then 2017 and the description here. And that's exactly what we want for our timeline there. Okay, let's keep styling. I might actually add a little bit of padding in there too. So padding, I want some room. So if we take a look, this is like really stuck to the edges. I want some room on the top, bottom, right, and left here. So I'm gonna add padding 4%. And if you just give padding one number, it will automatically apply that number to the top, right, bottom, and left. So I'm gonna hit save here and refresh, and yeah, that's like starting to look a little bit better. Okay, next I am going to target the paragraphs inside of timeline. So timeline space P, and I'm just going to give them a bit of margin on the top and bottom. So 2% 0. Before I save this, just take a look at what the paragraphs look like right now. So they're kind of all stuck together. And if we take a look at the paragraphs here in the diagram, they've got a little space on the top and bottom of them. So that's what I'm trying to achieve with that margin. So, oops, let me go back to the code here. Margin 2% 0, 2% on the top and bottom, 0 on the left and right. Once again, the difference between padding and margin, padding applies space on the inside of an element, margin applies space on the outside, so margin will push elements away from each other. So I'm going to save this, and then I will refresh, and now we've got some space in between our paragraphs. Okay, so it's starting to look a little bit more like the diagram. Okay, next I am going to style this year. So I'm going to go back to my code. That paragraph had a class of year, so I'll say .year. And I want to make it the color of teal. And I probably want to make it a lot bigger. So I'm going to say font size. Let's try 70 pixels, so 7 rem. And oops, we'll just save that there, and then we'll go back and give it a refresh. And yeah, that looks pretty good. We might want to change the size later, but for now I'm happy with that. Okay, another thing I want to do here is the current and the 2017 should be left aligned. Or even better, we can use Flexbox to achieve this. We can make the flex, so we can justify content. We can either do flex start, which would start it on the left-hand side of the page, or flex end, which would start it at the right-hand side of the container. So I would rather use Flexbox to achieve this. So I'm gonna give those specific divs a different class so that we can target them directly. So let's see here. Okay, so this date, I'm going to give it the class of 1. The date down here, I'm going to give it the class of 2. And the date down here, I'm going to give it the class of 3. I'm just going to save that. So just to recap, the date with current inside of it got the class of 1. The date with 2021 inside of it got the class of 2. And the date with 2017 inside of it got the class of 3. So now I'm going to go over to my CSS, and I'm going to target 1 and 3. So .1. .3, and I am going to say display flex, and then I'm going to say justify content flex end. So I'll save that, and then let's just take a look at what that looks like. Okay, perfect. Okay, I also probably want to put display flex on date itself and center my years vertically, because I want them kind of in the middle here. So let's go back and let's target date. So .date, display flex, justify content. No, sorry, not justify content. If we're centering vertically, we're going to do align items, and then we're going to use center. I'm going to save that. And there we go. Now it's centered. Something's up here, so let me check on that in a moment. Let's see. 1 and 3. Justify content, flex end. Let's refresh that one more time. Okay, let's see what's going on here and why maybe that's not working. So I'm just going to jump back over to my HTML for a second. Oh, 3 is on the wrong, so the class is on the wrong area. So it should be on date, not year. So that's the problem there. So 3, save, and that should fix it. Okay. Yeah, I had put the class of 3 on the paragraph. It should be on the div. It should be on the parent element. Okay, that's looking better. Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to make the line for my timeline here. So remember that we gave specific elements the class of line. So if we go back to the HTML for a second, we've got line on JFK Middle School, line on 2021, and line on Brown School. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give those a left border. So we'll go here and we'll say dot line, border left, and let's say, I don't know, 5 pixels, solid gray, and just see what that looks like. And we may need to take the other border off to really see it. No, I think that gives us a good description here. So 5 pixels, solid gray. So now we have that solid line down the middle of our page, which is what we wanted for our timeline. Okay, next we're gonna style that dot. So we're gonna style those spans to look like a dot. So I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna target the span with the class of dot. And I am going to give this span a height of something like 25 pixels. And I'm gonna give it a width of 25 pixels. So it's essentially right now it's going to look like a box. I'm going to give it a background color so that we can actually see it on the page. So background dash color teal. I'm going to save that. And let's go take a look at what our dot looks like right now. So there it is right here. Okay. So in order to make this dot round, we are going to use a border radius to achieve that. And if you set the border radius to 50%, it will make it round. So border dash radius 50%. Okay. So now we've got our circle. I am going to use Z-index here. So if you think of a website like a graph, we've got an x-axis, a y-axis that run vertically and horizontally. And then the z-axis is kind of like a 3D thing. So it would put that element in front of all the other elements. And the element with the highest z-index goes in front of every other element. So I am just going to give it a z-index of something like 999. In the hopes that nothing would ever be bigger. Okay. Next, I want to position it on top of this line. So in order to do that, I am going to use something called the position property, and I am going to use absolute positioning. So absolute positioning basically removes the element from the page and it's floating there essentially. Usually when you're positioning something absolute, you want to position its parent relative, so it's positioned absolute relative to its parent. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we probably want to put position relative on the date because the date is the parent. So let's go ahead and do that. Position relative. Okay. And then we're going to make our dots position absolute. So let me just go ahead and take a look at our dots one more time. So we've got dot right, dot left, and then dot right up here. Okay, so I'm going to throw position absolute on the dot itself. So position absolute, and I'm going to save that. And I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Okay, so now it's essentially like floating on top of our word here. Once we use position absolute, we have the ability to bump this dot that's essentially floating now and not taking up any space around the page wherever we kind of want it. And we do that using top, bottom, right, left. So we can give different values for top, bottom, right, left, and essentially like push this dot around the page. So I'm going to target the span of right first. So span dot right. And I'm going to say top, I don't know, let's try like 50%. And let's try left like 100%. And let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so we're close, but we're not quite there. Yeah, we can take a look here. So maybe not quite 100% for left, maybe like 99%. Let's try that. So left, let's try 98% and see what that looks like. Okay, now we're too far. So we can try 99, and I think that looks good. So 99% should put us in the middle there. And you might need to play around with that on your screen. Okay, and then kind of like the same thing for left here. So we're going to say span dot left, and we're going to say top 50%. And then we can say left, let's try 1%. Okay, that's not enough. So let's try negative. Let's try negative 1%. Oh, and that's still not enough. So let's maybe bump that up to like negative 2%. Yeah, that looks better. So now we've got our dots on the timeline as well. And I'm just going to remove the border from all of the elements here. And we can take a look at it once without the border. And if we're happy, then we'll move forward. Okay, so this is our timeline so far. And I think that's looking pretty good. We've got a great looking website so far. And let's just go take a look. I don't think we're missing anything here. I think that's looking good. So in the next video, we'll be building the HTML for the education section, the community service section, and this little button in the footer. So you can pause the video here, and I'll see you in the next one.